Hello guys, welcome back to my video podcast, Career Change, Heal to Lead. My name is Stephanie Grunke and I'm a leadership and career coach and an expert in building fulfilling careers. Thanks for listening today. So today's episode I want to dedicate towards emotions and emotions in business because this I think is a big topic but tends to be avoided a lot of the times. And I myself used to be someone who didn't really want to deal with emotions and used to be called a cold person. So I can relate to a lot of the things that I'll be talking you guys through today. I even picked for you, those of you who are watching me on video, white to wear, cold color. So emotions, difficult topic, but maybe some of the statements that I've heard from my leadership clients resonate with you so that you get an understanding of emotions in business. Are you dealing with this already? Are you dealing with this in the way that works for you? So things that I hear a lot is that I'm not very empathetic. I don't seem very approachable. I've heard from people that it takes time to warm up to me. I got difficulty dealing with emotions. I become defensive when people get emotional and I kind of want it to stop. Insecure people make me really annoyed or even aggressive. I just want them to own it up. I have a very high standard towards myself and others. I'm afraid to be too soft. I don't want to seem weak and I want to be taken seriously. I'm having a hard time building personal rapport with people at work. I'm being perceived as cold. I tend to step on people's toes a lot. I'm too direct. So these are all statements that I've heard from people around feeling uncomfortable with emotions in business, with emotions at work, and people kind of feeling like whenever there's emotions coming up, I feel awkward around this. I don't know how to handle this. It feels a bit weird. So if any of this is you, then yes, I'm going to have some really interesting insights for you today on how you can maybe work on this if it doesn't work for you, and how it actually doesn't have to be as scary as you thought it has to be. And if you feel like, oh, I'm exactly the opposite of all those things that you've just said, I'm extremely empathetic and I always could cry with everybody, then definitely do listen to my episode around people pleasing, because that might be something on this for you. But it's also going to be really helpful for you to understand and listen to this episode, because there's probably going to be colleagues and people in your life that are more from this side of the spectrum. And it always also helps to understand the people around you. So if any of these statements sound familiar to you, we'll unpack them together right now. If you already know that this is something you want to work on, because people keep asking me over and over again, yes, I do one-on-one coaching for leadership clients as well. So you can reach out to me on LinkedIn or Instagram. I'll drop all my information in the show notes in the bio here. So you can reach out, just send me a DM and we can always chat and see if I can help you or not. So no strings attached at all. But for now, enjoy today's episode and we're going to dive right in. So the statements I've just mentioned around emotions in business or lack thereof, or having some kind of fear around emotions at work, get summarized in, I think, a statement that I get a lot from people, which is, for example, when a team member gets really emotional, it makes me really awkward and uncomfortable and I just want it to stop. So how can I deal with situations like this a little bit better? First of all, you might have heard this phrase before, there's no room for emotions in business. Who of you has heard of this? Just ask yourself. I've heard this a lot, and in my mind, it's not really true. We are humans, we all have emotions. So trying to force them to stay out of business just means that you're probably suppressing them, that you're pushing them some other way, but that there's no emotions in business, I think is impossible, in my opinion. So my stance is, might as well learn how to deal with it. And that doesn't mean that you're gonna have to become a super emotional drama queen, or that you have to be an ice cold block that never has any emotions. There's actually a healthy way of managing your emotions. So first of all, if we go back to the statement I've just had around a team member getting emotional, and let's say you're the boss and you're not quite sure how to cope with this, let's see what's happening in this type of situation that makes you feel uncomfortable and feel like you don't know how to handle these emotions. The first thing usually is that your focus immediately is on the other person. but you don't really have an awareness of what's going on for you. You just kind of want it to stop because, yes, there's some discomfort, but really, have you ever asked yourself, why is the discomfort there? Why does it make you feel uncomfortable if somebody else around you displays emotions? And why would you ever try to seem very cold or too direct? Like, where's this even coming from? And in my experience, and this also very much comes from my own personal experience, we never stop to tune in with ourselves in these kind of situations. We're so busy on the outside trying to change something that we're not really sure what's happening on the inside. But that is actually the thing, right? We don't, in that situation, we don't want to get in touch with our own emotions, our own discomfort, or whatever else is going on with us, because it probably seems like something dangerous and uncontrollable because of sentences like, there's no room for emotions in business. So in the moment that emotions arise in a business context, they seem like a threat to our success, to our progress, to whatever we have built, which is usually really important to us. So, but when we go a bit deeper, and that's usually what I unpack with my clients in sessions, there is lots of emotions in these situations that are going on for you while you feel uncomfortable being with somebody else who's emotional in the room. There could be things like feeling guilty because you thought that I should have been able to control the situation and I wasn't, and there's this emotional outbreak now. So you feel guilty about this. Maybe you're struggling to understand what's happening, where this person's emotions are even coming from, because that's not how you work. You're usually more composed. Maybe you're also feeling a little bit of anger of even being confronted with the situation, now having to deal with it, although it makes you feel so uncomfortable. And if most of us are really honest to ourselves, there's usually a nudge of like helplessness and underneath all of these things that you're like, what do I do? Like, this person clearly doesn't feel good, or what can I do? What can I do to make it stop, right? So you feel a bit helpless. All of these things are happening for you in this moment. And clients have told me, well, Steffi, in these situations, I get in my head, like I'm trying to rationalize. I'm like, what did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? What do I do right now? And I'm just thinking, like my entire head is almost exploding. But unfortunately, that's usually not the way out of these situations, because again, it's a mechanism of trying to not deal with the emotions that are there. And the more, and maybe you know that from other parts of your life, the more we're trying to push something away and the more we're trying to pretend that something isn't there, the stronger it gets. And that is always true for emotions. So a healthy way of dealing with emotions is not trying to press them away, but actually dealing with them. And that's what we're going to do right now. So what is happening here in these situations where there's emotions, at least when I talk through this with my clients after these events have happened, and they're like, yeah, actually there is anger. Okay, there is helplessness. Yes, there is guilt. It's important to understand, where do these things come from and what's exactly happening to you, and how can you find a more comfortable way of dealing with all of this, right? So first of all, for you, the important thing to know is, if you want to become more empathetic, the only way is through. You need to be able to feel your own emotions. And I'll go into this a little bit at the end, where I'll give you really specific tips of how can you deal better with emotions at work. But you often think, probably, and I used to think this way, that showing emotions is a weakness. If I get emotional, if I cry or I show anger, if I show in any way too many emotions, it's a sign of weakness. So obviously you don't want that. But I can tell you it's actually not a weakness. A lot of people that suppress their emotions for the longest time, they end up in depression and burnout. So it's a sign of strength to go through this. And I'm inviting you right now to walk through these different emotions with me and really understand where they're coming from. Because once you look at them, you realize they're actually not that dangerous. And probably every person has this, right? I wouldn't be recording this podcast episode if this wasn't a topic that a lot of people are dealing with, a lot of people are struggling with, and a lot of people don't talk about because they might feel embarrassed or shame around this. So first thing to unpack is feeling guilty. Why do you feel guilty in situations when people around you get emotional, especially if you're the boss, the person that's leading the meeting, and this happens? Well, the thing is that usually if you want to dive a lot deeper into guilt, I definitely recommend the work of Brené Brown. She's written a lot about guilt, shame, and vulnerability. But in these situations, it often means that you feel responsible for the other person's emotions. So you feel guilt because you're like, this shouldn't have happened. I did something wrong because they are reacting this way. And that's where the guilt is coming from. And for you, it's really important that no, you shouldn't have been able to control this because you can't control other people. There's actually no need to feel guilty about this because it is not your responsibility, and you can't control other people no matter how hard you try. And maybe no matter how good you are at controlling your own emotions, it is not your fault what is happening. And I think that will take a lot of the pressure from you in this situation. At least it did for me when I started to realize, well, it's not my fault that certain things are happening. And I know that the other person on the other side can take care of themselves. But what you can always do in these situations is to ask, can I help? I can see that you're emotional. I can see that you're crying. I can see that you seem really angry. Is there anything I can do to help? Is there anything you need right now? Is there anything I can support you with? Because in that moment, it's this other person's responsibility to tell you what they need. You don't need to guess. You don't need to feel guilty. You don't need to try and control it, because maybe for them in that moment is a relief, right? I had a situation once where quite a senior person was talking to me about a big project. We had internationally go to Singapore, and he was like, yeah, and then on the project management, we need to do this and this and this and this. And I was like in charge of the project management at that time. And I just started crying in front of him because I was so overwhelmed. I was like, I don't know how we need to do this. Like, this doesn't seem right. And he was completely overwhelmed with the situation. And then I told him, I said, like, see, there's been so much pressure building up around this. For me, it was a relief in this moment to openly say that I don't think this is possible. And finally, this situation actually channeled into something that was extremely helpful, because both of us realized the way we were approaching it is not going to work. We need to have different conversations with the client, and it ended up for the better. If I had sucked it up and he had been extremely uncomfortable around it and we hadn't spoken about this, we wouldn't have actually worked out a really good solution, right? But yeah, it takes courage to cry at work. I'm not saying try tomorrow, but that's what I mean. So, but this other person, I know they felt guilty in that situation as well when I had like an emotional moment. And I like told them, like, that's not your fault, but this needed to come out. And yes, so that was helpful. Another thing I think that comes up in these situations, if you are the person who's like not the emotional one in the situation, is anger. And anger, in my experience, can have two different sources. So the first one is that it comes from a place of insecurity, that anger. You are like maybe angry with yourself, you're angry with this other person, that you're stuck in this situation where you're not quite sure how to react. You don't really feel like you can do anything to change what's happening right now. So there's anger about not being able to control the situation, to change the situation. And there's maybe also this insecurity and fear around, what might people think of me if they see the situation? They might not think I'm a good manager. They might think I'm a horrible boss. These are all things that are coming up in this moment. And I can tell you, this is just your mind playing tricks on you, because every time we feel something, our mind is trying to produce explanations of why that is happening. So a lot of this rationale that might be coming in that moment might not be true. It's just some of your thoughts coming up, but this is where some of the anger comes from. Or the other part that might be anger is if people in the situation that you're in have crossed your boundaries. If you feel like, okay, this person constantly has emotional outbursts while I'm in the room, I don't want to deal with this anymore, I don't know how to extract myself from the situation. So there might be anger because you feel like they're literally crossing a boundary with this, or maybe before people have crossed the boundary and that's why it led to the situation. So anger can also give you information about where was the boundary of yours crossed, and how can you maybe in the future try to make this different. And then the last part is discomfort. So the discomfort, I think I already paired it up earlier, is when somebody else gets emotional, and the discomfort usually comes from us ourselves not having embraced this emotion. So what I can say from my own experience is, like I think I said earlier, I had a phase in my life for 6 years where I didn't cry once, because I had so much stuff buckled up inside of me. At the end of this led to a burnout, so that's a different story altogether. But I was extremely uncomfortable around people crying because I never allowed myself to be sad. I never allowed myself to cry. And obviously that led to a lot of discomfort because the emotion was still inside of me. I just kind of pushed it down up to a point where it would maybe not come up and express itself in forms of tears, but there was still sadness out there. So inside of me, and if other people got sad around me, that obviously kind of like, that's how we work as humans. I mirrored this, like it touched something in me, and the discomfort came from like, oh my God, this person is now, making me feel some of the stuff that I am so violently trying not to feel, for example. Or if some people get angry around you and you feel really discomfort around people being angry, have you embraced anger for yourself? Have you found a healthy way of dealing with your own anger? Because especially I feel like for women these days, but even for men, aggression or anger is not something that we are allowed to show anymore, because we are closely associating that with violence. So for me, anger and violence are two very different things. Violence is a choice that you make in terms of how you're going to act, but anger as an emotion is going to be there, and you need to find a healthy way of channeling this out of your body. So these are all things that are probably coming up for you. If you feel discomfort, if other people are getting emotional, ask yourself, have I myself embraced this emotion? Because when I started embracing these emotions, for me, the discomfort went away when other people displayed these emotions. Now I don't feel helpless anymore when people are crying. I don't feel so helpless when people are getting angry. All of these things are things that I needed to work on within myself in order to then be able to not feel that discomfort around other people displaying the same emotions. So it actually helps you learn a lot about yourself. And if this is something that you want to work on, actually become a stronger leader by embracing your emotions, because I think that is what strong leaders are in my mind. The people that have an emotional intelligence towards themselves, but also towards others, and can actually, embrace what's inside of them, have healthy ways of dealing with their emotions. For me, this kind of statement of there's no room for emotions in business is just like, I don't know, last century stuff, because that's not how we work these days anymore. So really strong, good leaders are the people that know themselves really well and also are able then to hold room for other people. So that is the thing around discomfort. I've already kind of given you a couple of hints, that now towards the end, I want to give you 5 points that you can work on in order to have a healthier way of dealing with your emotions in business, in your work, in your leadership career. And if you want support in any of those, as I said before, always do reach out. But here we go. So first thing, give responsibility back to the people. If you are in an emotional situation with someone else, first of all, it's not your fault. It's not your responsibility. Yes, you can help. You can ask what kind of support they want, but you're not. It's not your fault. It's not your responsibility to help them get out of it. So that's an important thing, right? Empathy means that you're able to relate to somebody else's emotions, but it doesn't mean that you need to fix them and make them happy. Really important. Empathy, again, doesn't mean that you have to fix other people and make them happy. It means you're able to relate to why somebody is feeling a certain way, and you're able to relate to the emotions. Why, again, it's important that you are able to relate to your own emotions, but it doesn't mean that you are responsible for the emotions and the actions. Really important. Second thing is, get rid of your fear of rejection. If you try to not be emotional at work, or don't like if other people see that you or other people around you are emotional, then get rid of your fear of rejection. Nobody's going to judge you for this. If somebody wants to fire you just because there's emotions in your department, then it's probably not your place of work. Stop caring about what other people think when there's emotions in yourself and others, because I think the people that reject you for that are usually the people that haven't embraced them yourself. So you can actually become a role model, because otherwise we wouldn't be talking, especially in Germany, and I think even in the UK, about, it's really hard to find a therapy spot. There's more than ever people in depression and burnout, because we don't learn these things. Nobody teaches us this at school. So when you develop a healthy way of dealing with your emotions, you're going to be a role model to so many people. You're going to make a huge contribution to having a healthier workforce, and actually a more productive and more performant workforce as well. So stop being afraid of being rejected for being able to deal with emotions. Then the third one is, if some of these things that I've been talking about actually have pointed you towards some deeper insecurity, if you feel like, okay, the anger that gets triggered is like, I'm super insecure about certain things. I'm insecure about my own position here. I feel like I need to behave a certain way at work because if people see the real me or see aspects of me that might not, progress me in my career, then definitely do listen to my episode on imposter syndrome, because there I talk a lot about how to actually get rid of these inner insecurities and feel more stable with your own kind of like self-worth and all of these kind of things. So that's something you should definitely look into. And then the fourth part is start setting boundaries. So important, right? You don't need to deal with everybody's stuff. You don't need to be everybody's hero. You don't need to be able to help everybody. And if you're yourself realizing, especially through this episode, hey, I have some work to do to embrace my own emotions and develop a healthy relationship with it, you shouldn't be like throwing yourself into the most intense emotional kind of situations at work and trying to solve them. It's good for you to set boundaries and be like, that's what I can deal with. This is what I can't deal with. And that's fine. Even if you're a boss or a good manager or a leader, you're still a human being. And it doesn't mean that you have to know everything and be great at everything. And I think some of the really great leaders are really the people that are embracing their so-called weaknesses, or that are really aware of like, what can I do and what can I not do. I've just recently gotten to a training, and what they said is really interesting. You learn from a lot of people that have built their own businesses and like multi-millionaires by now. They said the biggest thing for them in building their businesses was to decommit, because they said, well, if you're committing, it means that if you're a good leader, you commit to something, you stick to your word, but you will only be able to guarantee your commitment if you're really good at saying no and decommitting to other things as well, because you realize every time I say yes to something, I want to keep my word. So if I say yes to too many things, it's humanly impossible to hold all my commitments. So I need to learn to decommit. So maybe that word works better for you than setting boundaries, but in a way, also become aware of like, where do you want to decommit? Where do you want to set boundaries? And then last but not least, I think I've talked about this a lot, but I think there's an element that in my mind, everybody should go through. You need to learn how to feel and manage your own emotions. Feel your own feelings. There's just no other way than through. And it's important. Yes, maybe it's discomfort around this. Maybe you have suppressed and repressed your emotions for years and years and years. At least that used to be me. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect at managing my emotions, but I think I have such a more healthier way of dealing with them right now. And for me, only when I learned that emotions are actually not a sign of weakness, but they're there anyways, I learned that to handle them in a very healthy way. And I really want you to do the same thing. If this is something you want to support with, then definitely send me a DM. I do this, and I know people will talk about this a lot, especially not when it comes to leadership coaching. It's all going to be like, how are you strong? How are you doing power posing? How do you become this really strong leader? But honestly, I can tell you, any person I've ever worked with, this is something that comes up no matter what context, and it's normal. Right? And I just want to make a contribution. You can probably see that I feel a little bit passionate about this, but I want to make a contribution to this being more of a topic of conversation, because it's going on for everyone. So why should we not talk about this? And I hope that this episode was helpful for you, that you could take away some of those things, that you have maybe gotten some ideas on how to be less of the cold person, or that maybe, at least what I have found is that if you're being cold and distant, if that's something that you get as a feedback, I found that often that's just a protection mechanism. This is you protecting yourself against something that you feel you can't quite handle. So don't be so hard on yourself, and less perfection and less composure is actually what makes other people follow leaders. It makes you really approachable. It makes you a great leader. And that's also what makes you authentic, because this kind of stuff is going on for everyone. I can see this again and again in my work as well. I'm not always comfortable as a coach to share when I'm not doing well, but it's usually what inspires people the most because it makes you approachable. It shows that nobody's perfect, and you can still achieve really great things in your life. So I really hope that this is making a contribution to you in your own leadership journey, because I believe as a great leader, we really need to work on ourselves, get to know ourselves as much as we really need to build really strong business acumen. So both of these things are important. So I hope this was helpful to you. Like I said, if you want support on your journey, always reach out via DM on Instagram or LinkedIn. And please let me know how you like this episode. Always love to hear from you as well on some messages. And if you really like this, please give me a thumbs up or 5-star rating. I would really, really love to spread this to more people. If there's anybody you can think of in your network that you want to forward this to, please do. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I hope I'll see you soon. Bye bye, guys.